When I was in college, I took a course on Afrocism. It's a course that dealt with religious beliefs, rituals, and practices of indigenous groups in sub-Saharan Africa. After taking this class, I felt educated, cultured, felt pretty good about it, right? Upon some honest reflection, however, I felt that the course was inadequate. It didn't give me the cultural competency that it promised. It was informative, and I thought it was a good class, nevertheless inadequate. Why? Well, that didn't make sense to me until I thought about my own experience as an Asian American person living in this country, and evaluating that experience, or evaluating taking that course through the lens of my experience, which gave me clear vision of what that course really was about. So what am I talking about? Well, as an Asian American person, I often became a token Asian. I was always invited to be in a picture. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about? You know. So what it does is that it gives the appearance of diversity. Whether or not it actually has diversity, if the group or institution or the culture actually has that diversity, doesn't matter. It gives you the appearance of diversity. So basically, it serves as an optic or optics. It gives you the illusion that there's diversity. And over again, I'm asked to be part of this picture. Let me give you an example. I was asked to be a cover model for the admissions catalog at my undergraduate school. Now, and this happens over and over again in my life. Unless I am drop-dead gorgeous, and I'm open to that possibility. But my wife right now is shaking her head, so I'm thinking that that's probably not why, right? I was asked to be the cover model because at the time, the institution was not very diverse. And the rhetoric was, well, it serves a function. It allows the school to represent or present itself as diverse so that people who look like me may be enticed or want to come to this school. Well, I don't think that's effective. First of all, it's a lie. Secondly, that after 20 years since that time, that school has increased the demographic that I represent to about a little bit over 1%. It's not very effective. It's a lip service. Incidentally, that picture appeared again 8 years after I graduated in the bookstore webpage. So they either really like me and they really think I'm gorgeous with our receding hairline and skinny little body that I have, or that they're using this for optics. Oh, full set of hair. Those are the days. I think the diversity requirement, the one course diversity requirement serves a similar function. It's a lip service. It is a form of tokenism. Also, if you have this kind of checkbox system where you check off a requirement, it gives the sense that this is something that you check off. Get it out of the way. And implying, get that issue out of the way. Get these kind of people's concern out of the way. It has that connotation. And having it as an elective, rather than part of the requirement for history, English, math, whatever, then it gives you the notion that somehow issues of my people will never be the center. It will always be the elective. It will always be marginalized. We will always be minor. Not just in number, but we are minoritized. We are made to feel smaller, minor, less important. Never just American, but hyphenated American. Gotta describe myself. Never be accepted as the norm. My body will forever seen as perpetually foreigner. I think we can do better. I think there's a way that we can do this more comprehensively and holistically. How do we do this? First, students in the foyer, listen. First, I think we should get rid of it. Get rid of it. It's not effective, and to a degree, to me, it's offensive. To have one requirement that somehow makes you culturally competent, get rid of it. However, I think that we should encourage diversity. Get rid of it for the students, but require it for the teachers. Review your syllabus. Bring diversity in all aspects of the curriculum. Not just one course, but every discipline. Now, when I say this, I know teachers, I know there's going to be a pushback. And when there's a pushback, I want to have an answer. Here's my answer. Also, when I say this, science and math and STEM people will say, well, that's easy for you to say, theologian. You're in humanities. It's easier to do. I would say, okay, well, even if it's easy, humanities professors don't do this either. So let me present to you what I think is part of the solution. Well, if you're requiring history and that history course does not cover the fact that Chinese Americans in this country built the foundation and the infrastructure for this country, like the Transcontinental Railroad, or that the history course does not cover the fact that there was a Japanese internment camp because of the Executive Order 9066 by FDR, if the history class does not cover that, I think it's inadequate. And I think you can include those in the history requirement. As we know, the literary canon is pretty white. I'm just going to say it. Or, at best, black and white. And I would say, well, include some of these stories as part of the requirement, not as a side note, but as part of the English requirement. The one that deals with the complexity of the effects of a war, or the complexity and intersectionality of how people with this body experience their lives in this world. Or include literature that makes Latin American bodies feasible also. You're teaching art. Include African American artists who deal with social issues. It forces students and teachers to deal with the social justice issues in this country. Include Asian bodies, which makes the conversation about social justice more global. If you're talking about geography, what if we taught geography with no boundaries? Because in fact, boundaries don't exist in reality. What if we did that? Or if we have to teach boundaries, how about we teach about how those boundaries happen through colonization? That those boundaries and limitations exist as a result of colonization, and the effects of that colonization is very much alive today. Perhaps in our education system, we need to decolonize our educational system. Full disclosure, I'm a post-colonial theologian. You guessed it. For those classes who are content-driven, who says, well, we don't have room for diversity. It's impractical, it's unrealistic. The same kind of rhetoric that I hear everywhere, impractical, unrealistic. Whenever you hear that, I think a suspicious light should go on. Well, there's a teacher here at Bellarmine, should I embarrass her, Dr. Challoner? That covers all those contents, yet also require her students to attend lectures that deal with diversity issues in science. Women of science, or better yet, women of color in STEM. It's beautiful because that way, not only are the students required to deal with diversity issues in STEM fields, but also it requires the school to hold lectures, enough lectures on diversity so that students can attend. If you're talking about business, what if you taught business from a different perspective, from female perspective? Here's a friend of mine from college, Genevieve, I'm gonna embarrass her. She started a company called Sitter City. She realized that CEOs of these big companies do not see this issue as important. As a female person with female experience, she says, how are they missing this? So she started a company, babysitting company, and She became multimillionaire and sold it. And now she does what she wants to do with her life, which is being an opera singer. I should have really befriended her in college a little bit more. I think this is important because it has to do with my experience, and that's how I see education system in America, especially in the institution of higher education. Let me have a little bit of a digression because it's all related. According to Brian Metzinger, Father Metzinger, racism is a culture, it's a system which has meanings and value which is expressed in symbolic forms. But that symbol that he's talking about is talking about the soul of a culture, not external symbols. Let me explain. External symbols means things like the music that you listen to, the clothes that you wear, the food that you eat. We're not talking about external symbols. External symbols become lip services to diversity. You can say, well, I like Chinese food, so I must be woke. I can't be a racist because I like sushi, right? These external symbols are not how we get to the core of the problem of diversity. Just because you do yoga does not make you open-minded, progressive, and enlightened. Nothing against yoga. I'm not, speaking against yoga. But I think that one diversity course that's required as a diversity competency requirement serves the same function. And that taking that one course, this is the thing that I'm afraid of. Taking that one course gives the illusion for the students that good intention, I get it, but that good intention can contribute to these kind of external symbols. By taking this course, students might say, well, I took a course on Africism. Now I know Africa. As if it's like a country or something, right? So what do? Well, it's a daunting task to do an overhaul of this, and again, impractical and unrealistic, people will say. Well, there's actually a group in this school right now, LET, a task force that is looking at a comprehensive way of dealing with diversity for every single discipline. Even with the pushback, they're looking into that. But I think where we start initially, I think we should start with individual professors and their introspection. They need to do an introspection. And as an institution, we need to do an institutional introspection. How am I doing? Well, one way to examine how you're doing is not to look at the subject matters that you cover. Well, I cover diverse topics, because if you just do that, then you can encourage mansplaining, whitesplaining. Do you get this? Right? So rather than doing that, if you want to look at the systematic problem of racism and deal with that, the best way to do this anywhere is follow the trail. Follow the trail of money. Are they putting money where their mouth is? Individually, what we can examine then is not to look at the topics that you cover, but the authors that you use. Authors of your textbooks. In fact, this was from a friend of mine, a colleague, Dr. Christine Hong from Columbia Theological Seminary, who gave me this idea. When she suggested this, I looked at my syllabus and looked at my authors and realized my textbooks were all written by white authors. Me. So it was a moment of epiphany. If that can happen to me, I think it's an important epiphany for people who are in the dominant group. I think it's an exercise that tells you where we are, and we can do an honest reflection about where we are and what we can do. So why is a theologian such as myself concerned with this? Because I believe celebrating the fullness of humanity gets us closer to God and to one another. And we can't do that unless we celebrate it in the fullness and in a rigorous form and in a comprehensive form. After all, we're at Bellarmine. where the spirit of Thomas Merton lives. And Thomas Merton said that we are already one, but we imagine we're not. How do we imagine that we're not? Because we are only concentrating on Eurocentric textbooks, Eurocentric authors, and Anglo authors and topics. But we are already one. How are we one? Well, because God created us that way. There is unity in diversity. If we celebrate diversity and find commonality in that diversity, we celebrate the fullness of humanity, which gets us closer to God. So what we have to do is to recover who we are. And our education system should reflect that. Because we are already one. All of us are already one. What we have to do is simply be who we are. Thank you.